Welcome, everybody. This is our sixth session of the Thought Leadership for Systems Transformation program, and we are honored to welcome Anastasia, Laukkanen, and Alyona, Yuzefovich. Alyona and Anastasia will start by sharing their reflections in response to the collective narrative, and after that, we have a Q&A session. So with that, I'm giving the mic to Alyona and Anastasia, please.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I also want to thank everybody who participated in the World Cafe about our work. Thank you so much, maybe first of all, for the very loving spirit that I felt through the narrative. We read it many times with Alyona and we discussed it a lot. And thank you for a lot of understanding, a lot of very honest and sincere questions. I felt a lot of connections through the narrative. I want to share what was born after reading your narrative and what is alive in us now, because actually many questions that you asked is something very urgent, which is sitting in us right now. I want to give the word to Alyona.
Yeah, hi everyone. A lot of thoughtfulness, a lot of love and support that we received through the narrative. It was so heartwarming just to have ourselves mirrored by other practitioners out there in the world. And this mirroring was with a lot of heart. I'm sitting on a small island, which is called Heybeliada. I'm having my forest and my sea next to me, which is a lot of privilege to have. And many people who are in a position like mine are not anywhere that privileged. Myself and my daughter, we had to flee from Russia. And since then we were in Istanbul, and it's been a massive exercise in complexity about what does it mean to have all your life, your work, your support structures collapsing in connection to many other spheres of your life, and enormous guilt and enormous questions about how do we go from here. Outside complexity and inside complexity and immediate circle complexity. It's something that we've been through, I think, since the 24th actively. It's a very interesting place and time to be in this conversation with you. So back to you. You're also not in Istanbul, although
right now, by the coincidence, I'm another Turkish city. But otherwise, I'm one of those Russians who left before. I live in Istanbul for more than 10 years. My husband is Turkish. And despite I've been living in Turkey, my work, as you would understand from the narrative, was connected to Russia completely. So everything I do, I was getting education like in Sweden, in Russia, and in other places. And I really felt that it's very important to bring what we do and our approaches and these ideas to Russia and to Russian societies and to people around us there. So most of our work was always connected to the Russian audience. So I was going to Moscow all the time and to other cities. So like it was between Istanbul and Moscow, really. And then for the last 3 months, just to understand the scale of things, just to Turkey, they say that more than 100,000 Russians moved. So for people like me who used to live in Istanbul already, last 3 months has been a crazy logistic center to welcome and to invite and to help, like where should you live? What should be like, what to do with the phone, how to like, what Istanbul is like. But in the same time, I'm trying to understand what does it mean for our work and how to continue to work with people who are there in Russia. Because in the beginning, we both had feeling that it's like, it's over. We're not like, everybody left and we're not gonna do anything else in Moscow again. And I had a very interesting conversation that period with my friend from Syria. I have a very good friend from Syria in Istanbul who really helps me to look at the situation as well. And she said that after the war began in her country, she started to work more with Syria after the war than before. And she felt that she did more for the civil society there after the war than she ever did before, which also made me think that maybe actually not everything is suddenly, crumbled and done, but maybe it will continue in some way. It was very, very beginning, and very end of February. So that's on where we are, just to understand physically where we sit and where we're talking with you from. But what we really wanted to share with you is actually where we are at inside, because what's been happening put a lot of questions on our work.
I think it's really interesting that we're having this session this week, because probably it was the hardest week in this last almost 3 months now, or like 2.5. We didn't freeze the work. Like what we did, we started the third cohort of our university course. We were trying to do some risk management in cases. What if our students get arrested because they say war, because they can't say war within the learning environment, because we're creating a trusting learning environment, a warm one, and then they get arrested? What if someone from the university gets arrested because we are teaching from outside and people are, staying in the country? So we continued the work, some of it, and exactly this week, I think we found ourselves in a place of deep questioning of all the frameworks and even like the whole line of work that we've been doing. I would probably move several months before to October, when we were having a conversation with Fodor about the applicability of systems practices in places which, as we now know, were in the rapid downfall towards a massive attractor of fascism, because Russia now is a fascist regime, that's no doubt. And we've been watching that reinforcing feedback loop, at least for myself, and I've been involved in protest movement for the last more than 10 years. So all of my working life, and I'm 33 now. So most of my career, most of my active social and political life, I've been seeing the systems getting worse continuously and faster. I'm not a generation that has seen things getting better. Certain little victories here and there, but mostly we've been seeing slower, and then faster downfall towards what we see now. And we were having this conversation in October around, I can map the system, I can talk to stakeholders, but we have a massive stakeholder where negotiations make no sense whatsoever, because this stakeholder has massive power, massive resources, endless budget, thank you to fossil fuels and world's dependence on fossil fuels, endless budget on repressions, on propaganda. So what do we do with that? How can systems practices be applicable in this kind of situations where there's no interest whatsoever from the side of the stakeholder who has massive power in the system to have any sort of collaboration? Worse than that, if we take Kahane's idea of stretch collaboration, okay, you can go and work in one team with your enemy if you need to work together, but that concept requires that you have somewhat equilibrium in terms of the power that you hold. And in our case, I've seen those compromises so many times. And in many of those compromises we see now, it was not a stretch collaboration. It was one stakeholder gets it all. So for us, a good question since then was okay, what can we do? And the answer I found for myself then is to prepare the field. And we were doing a lot of work around that. And this week, we had a conversation with Anastasia and our third partner about what do I teach? I would walk into the Zoom classroom and I don't know what to teach, because I don't see where anything of that is actually applicable in our situation. And why should people spend 2.5 hours with me, talking about feedback loops and Cynefin framework and iceberg model, instead of just spending 2 hours with their kids, taking care of their health, because everyone is really it's been a massive stress that people were in, nothing in comparison with what Ukrainians are going through. That's just out of question, but still people are really exhausted. And it was a very, I think, honest moment of deep inquiry into the very core, the very purpose of the practice. Why are we doing this? For what? Why investing in the things that are not, yielding results immediately? That might sometime later, probably, hopefully, let something emerge. It might be not. Like I will just better go and be a gardener. Like you see the result faster and it's more predictable. And then we had a little event that we're doing next week. Adam Kahane speaking for the Russian audience for the first time. And we sent out a little invitation that I was crafting, I think, for a week. And I was wrestling with each and every word, how to say things that are clear enough for those who would respond to the invitation, but that are also neutral enough so that no one will report us to the police very soon. And we were sending it in a situation where we cannot do any big public official statements. And in this kind of environment, how do you send out an invitation to deal with conceptual void? All the tools that people know about how to deal with these conflicts are not useful at all. And the notion of systems practices are pretty much unknown to the context, to Russia. There are not many practitioners who are doing that in Russian. And I think we received in 2 days almost 200 applications from all sorts of people. People are like passing the invitation secretly to their friends and to their, trusted networks. And for me, there was, I think, a pivotal week where I was again for myself reconfiguring, reconceiving why this is the line of work I want to be in, not just in spite of what's going on, but because of what's going on. So several days ago, you would receive us in a very different state, because we were literally like, should we just stop the course, stop all of this work? And now we are in a very different place. And I think that honest existential moment of sitting with the question, what if everything that you believed in is useless? So what? What if everything you believed in is not helpful? What if it's nowhere even close to where we need to be? Because war is one thing, climate is still there. In the middle of the war, Hungary just voted for another 4 years of Viktor Orban, who is a tiny version of Putin's narrative in a way. Those moments of questioning deeply, in terms of the theory used, like the letting go piece, really letting go of everything, all your conceptions about who you are, what is your work, who are the people you work with, all of that. And then just being with it, including being with grief. And it sounds fluffy, but I've just been sharing with Fedor that moment of, we don't like sadness, we don't like grief. It's something that you want to go to your therapist with to be fixed. It's like sincerely sitting with it. It's not something we do regularly. And I think this week was, for me, the moment of sitting, really honestly sitting with this grief and letting it wash you all over and seeing what emerges out of that. Never thought I would be in this place. In a way, I think what systems practices, and also more of the approach, the worldview, if I may. I'm not using mindset, no, to Dave Snowden. The attitude towards the world and ourselves and the humbleness that comes with systems practices is a lot what helped me to at least be able to have the courage to walk into those places of darkness and sadness and hopelessness and helplessness and be with it, not trying to run away and put a plaster on it and say, yeah, think positively. No, sometimes we really need to think negatively and be with that if this is what's there. Although I was not okay. That was a really long speech, but I hope I kind of told in a nutshell, tried to share with you what it feels like to be a systems practitioner in my shoes and the context that we've shared with you, and probably some of that would somehow resonate with other practitioners in their context, because we're not unique in terms of the awful things that we're going through. Anastasia, back to you, my love.
We actually wanted initially to invite kind of conversation of practitioners in crisis. But they just said that we need a whole new session, well, another session for that, because we're not the only one in this kind of situation. The system practitioners who suddenly understand that like maybe everything that is happening around them is bigger than their beautiful words or beautiful set of tools. And that's a big question. That's something that we are lucky to have a lot of friends around the world who work in the field, and we keep on asking and talking to them, because this feeling of what's the point of these tools, what's the points of these frameworks that used to bring such a hope, not bringing hope anymore. Because I was particularly bitter in the beginning, because most of these frameworks come from the Western world. And I had, this is very irrational, but somehow you think that, okay, the problem that we see around in Russia, they're because not enough people know these concepts, not enough people work with it. And if just we show this concept to more people, if just that would be a critical mass in Russia that speak this language, and we did like, we started courses, we organized events, tried to do still very little, but we hoped a very potent community of practice, and then everything will change. Because it did in the countries where these frameworks are from. That's what you kind of think, and then you think that, wait, it didn't, because the response from these countries to the situation was the same, simple-minded and brutal. Like none of the responses seemed to stop the future violence. But with this, as Alyona said, letting go process, I'm also thinking, and it's also the conversation that we invite a lot of people in, what should be born there? Is it the same kind of concepts? Is it the same kind of framework? Should we continue working with them? And we really believe that we should, because we started our university course because we really believe that should be happening. But maybe there is also something else. Maybe there is something else is emerging. And there were one question in the narrative to try to find the word. We never could find the word. But I also wonder if you feel something emerging outside of these tools and outside of the system work. And the thing that there was also answering the question, everything that ever happened in Russia, in my honest opinion, always happened because of crazy, dedicated work of people not connected to government or politics in any way. And it's always also used to make me irritated, because why the only hospice for children in Russia should be built by the girl that I studied in university with? Why national green education, ecological education should be done by the girl my age? Why there is only environmental film festival I am doing, and there is nothing happens else? And like, it's in the same time incredible pride for these people who in the same time with existing government and politics was trying to create something else. And it doesn't work inside the country. And there is so many questions about how you're part of the politics. And there's one of the most popular things in Russia to say, I am outside of the politics. And it sounds ridiculous, but many people, including me, honestly believed it, because what is the future that you want to be part of creating? And many people were actually creating. And I really believe that after the initial shock and initial, moving around, like people going to different places and adapting to the new thing, this incredible creative power of this future will come again, because it was what I continuously saw around me. That was what I was really proud to be part of myself. That's something that gives me incredible hope. Even though we used to tell with Alyona, we have a lot of very different opinions about things that are happening. And in our work, we are very often put the polarized roles. But once we found out that we actually act, Alyona, if you don't mind me sharing that we act from very different places inside. She acts, if you know the concept of the deep adaptation, she acts from the premises that it's over. We just should accept that it's over. our only work is to do it a bit more gracefully and help a bit more people on the way. And I act from what they call radical optimism, that when you know everything, they call it dedicated optimism, like you know data and it sounds really, really bad, but you really believe that there will be something, or you see this something inside people that will actually get everybody, like, I don't know, change things. Or we've seen such a crazy changes already. Why cannot be another one? I don't know how these two absolutely opposite things brought us together, and we do absolutely same work with Alyona. The recent changes, the recent happenings, the recent event really made my radical optimism much less radical and much less optimism. But thinking actually also trying to respond to your narrative, trying to respond what you wrote to us after discussing our work, really brought some optimism back.
Thank you so much, Anastasia and Alyona. It's time for Q&A.
Thank you both. I love this framework you said of the conceptual void. What do you do when systems thinking, nothing works? There's no hope, there's no power, there's no place to stand. If you have leverage and a place to stand, you can move the world. But if you only have leverage or a place to stand, you can't do very much of anything. And so I'm just wondering, as you sit in that place, has anything come forward now, or are you still in that? And if something's coming forward, could you talk about that, please?
Thanks a lot for this question. For me, I would say that I've seen this void inside as a systems practitioner, looking at the context, and at the same time outside, because all of the analytics, Facebook posts, media in Russian language that I've been consuming, and we've been all doing a lot of doom scrolling, as you may imagine, in those 2 and a half months. So what I was seeing outside is how the same old lenses continue showing the same old things, and that there's a massive deficit of stories to relate to. So like, okay, we are now the Nazi Germany. Let's see how Nazi Germany overcome that, how they've done denazification. What are the steps that we as a country need to do after this somehow ends? And at best, okay, how was the German, the resistance working? So that's the only conceptual story that I've been seeing outside, where people were gaining insight into what's going on and how to make sense of what's going on. And that's sad, because this is something that happened more than 70 years ago. And there's been so many other stories and processes happening that are not known at all. And I've seen a lot of analytics done by economists and political scientists and social scientists through their lens only, without any, transdisciplinary attempts. And they've been continuously producing the same results again and again, the same thinking and solutions that people were seeing. And what, in that sense, I felt privileged, because I had many more stories and many more lenses to look at the situation. I can relate to Kahane's work and what Andreas partners do. I can relate to many other processes that were happening all over the world in way worse situations. But at the same time, what for me felt taking my power away is that it was a combination of, on the one hand, the absence of very clear answer. Okay, I have my tools. I'll take this one because it applies to this kind of situation, and I'll go and apply, and we'll see what emerges. We kind of did that with solidarity circles that we immediately started hosting for our community of practice. Okay, I have a tool, I'll go apply it. And it worked. But it was definitely not something transformational. It wasn't an alchemical action, if I refer to another speaker, amazing speaker that you had on the program. It was not something pivotal. It was not something that would really change the situation on the systems level. It was definitely more on the hospice side. What I've started doing is I started to listen more to other practitioners. I'm probably surprisingly more interested in more concrete, probably more science-based approaches now. I'm really interested to dig more probably into complexity science in what Dave Snowden and Nora Bateson are doing, and where I'm probably not feeling any energy for myself is to talk about the future, surprisingly, and collective talk about the future, because I don't see where that's applicable. So doing what we have with the resources that we have in the moment that we have with the people that we have is kind of the way forward. Because what really crushed me is, on the one hand, there's guilt. You had the privilege of all that and you didn't do enough. You've been seeing what was going on. Your friends were out of politics and you could have talked to them. And on the other hand, in complexity, as we all know, there's no best practice. There's no out-of-the-box solutions. What was difficult for me is to really let myself stay in the sensing and presencing long enough where it feels that your moral obligation is to rush to action, to rush to do, to save, to support, to volunteer, to do something. And I had a dramatic tension in me because my systems practitioner side was like, go figure out your own stuff and your life, get stable, get present. From that, go listen and do sensing. And from that, you will hear what needs to be done. And my more probably like panicking and probably an ego side as well was on the go get on the horse and let's go fight. My whole story about getting into the system practitioner world was dismantling the war narrative that I've been living and working through my whole life. And this is where this tension between inner war and inner peace just got at its max, because that was actual war. And how do you stay at peace? How do you not become at war with yourself, at least? So that was the massive tension that I was dealing with, and that consumed a lot of my energy. What we've decided to do now is more of sharing the stories kind of thing, preparing the field and building knowledge about some other ways of working apart from what people know. And we have, as a country, I think, really low capacity to be in complexity. People take complexity as chaos and they want simple solutions and strong men very soon. So just sharing the knowledge that, okay, the messy part is actually the good part, even if it looks messy. Strong man, strong hand kind of thing is a dangerous thing. So that was a long answer to a very neat and concrete question, but I hope that also gave the sense of the journey that we've been through in terms of questioning the work and figuring out steps forward.
So many of the things that you've said are about stepping someplace larger, or about literally physically being somewhere else, about questioning the content of what you're offering when you're teaching, about the ways that your experiences resonate with people all around the world. It makes me want to ask the question of how much of that lends itself to questioning nationalism as an organizing principle for you as systems practitioners, or for systems practitioners writ large, but people who are doing that kind of work with the intention of working toward qualitative fundamental change. How does that organizing principle possibly get in the way or change somehow for you or not? Nationalism is one of those assumptions. We live in a world organized by a state system. And when we understand the problem, the real problem, that you're really experiencing it, we understand it and define it in national terms. But experiences in Palestine, experiences in places all around the world have similar experiences. And when we talk about being located physically, you left one place and now you're somewhere else. can the world that you are actually trying to help transform be defined and understood in those nationalist terms effectively? Or is that one of the ways we're stepping out, or that you're stepping out? How do we try to even question that framework in order to try to get somewhere that maybe doesn't reproduce the same kind of power or the same kind of problem?
Nationalism is something that at least I think a lot about, and inside our little team we have all kind of free little anarchists, because we don't believe in borders or nationalism as a principle. Some questions that are so uniting for the world around us is something that I will say for myself and not say for others. It's just something that when we talk about this future that you want to be part of creating, in this future, there is no this concept. And I don't know what exactly means in 21st century to say that you're from this or that country. For me, it's some very, very old concept that is trying to remain in reality by like the power and clothes. I know in my future, there is none of that.
I can probably also try to address it from the identity perspective, because if we're putting systems practitioner lens on all that, for me, it's a lot about where I feel the responsibility and the agency. Because, for example, if I'm a Russian-speaking systems practitioner working in Kenya or in the US, what does it change? What surprisingly got important for me is probably two things when all this happened. A, where I have my voting rights, because this is where I have both responsibility and agency to do political work. And the second question was just your deep understanding of a specific context. And it's not defined by borders, but it's defined by scars. For me, it is defined by scars. I have very specific scars that many of them happen in many countries. Some scars are only happening in this specific context. And I felt that very clearly while I was doing my master's in Sweden. And we had a conversation with my classmate. She was my age, from one of the Northern European countries, with really a happy family and doing a lot of happy work, like really happy work around, youth and empowerment. And I had a feeling that I'm like 100 years older, that inside, if you see my soul, it's all scarred. I have like half of my leg, probably, and a lot of scars in my face, because I've been living in a really brutal reality, and it's a normal brutal reality. And I also understand that there are way more violence-based countries than Russia, but the normalization of violence in our specific context was massive. In comparison to that person, I felt as if she's young and happy, and I'm all brutalized. I've spent years in therapy cleaning that shit out to be able to actually function. And I had an enormous question to myself. Okay, what does it mean? She won a lottery and I didn't. I suffered a lot. I did a lot of healing. And she just didn't need a healing because she just didn't have those scars. And there's no meaning to it, no meaning to my scar. I was just like, I grew up like this, in a broken family, in a broken country, in a very much broken culture. And it's not, making me stronger or that I can relate to more things. No, it's just there. So for me, when I was, observing all this, what's been happening in this 2.5 months, the only thing that where I felt responsibility and where I kind of felt Russian was that I probably know better than some other people the inner scars that are the roots of a lot of bad things that are happening and unfolding. And just knowing the scars might hopefully give me a little bit more insight into the type of healing work that can be done. It's not that I will go and rush and do the healing work immediately. I'm not at the stage where probably that's possible. But at least, in relation to outside practitioner, my understanding of the context and the scarves here might be, making me a little bit more grounded for the work. So I'm not thinking of national borders, national states here, but I'm more thinking about specific contexts and where there's not like a border between contexts, they all overlap. Right now, I'm communicating with Russian diaspora abroad, someone who moved out in the 90s and someone who moved out 5 years ago and 3 years ago. They're half local, half Russians. Some of them are coming back, some of them are living there. So it's all really a way more complex world. It's just, so my context is just my networks. And this is all we had. We had this conversation with a friend of mine who's like, Russians are incapable of coming together and doing democracy in a democratic way. I'm like, who are Russians? They don't exist. Russians are we. It's like adults. There's no adult who will come and fix things and who know what to do. It's us. Like, it's everyone we have. So it's us and our networks is the only thing that actually exists. And what we can do in here is probably everything that we can do. So for me, this is how I figured out this, interplay between national state and my identity and a passport means in this context, and where my work can have a relation to that. Just knowledge of the context and knowledge of the people. That's it.
I'm really sorry that I was only able to be partially present because some of the things that were said really resonated with me, and I thank Alyona and Anastasia for that. And I just wanted to pose a question that in a way relates to what has been discussed previously. There's been a lot of attention towards Russia and a lot of willingness to do something about what's going on in terms of stopping the Russian aggression and in terms of also helping of people inside and outside of Russia who are trying to do something about it. But the question for me is what exactly could be done using the tools that we have? Is there a space to think collectively about it? Is there a space to look for solutions? Or should we just allow it to grow by itself and not try to be overly active? Just focus on what we can do inside Russia and not necessarily try to appeal to people of goodwill from outside.
It's a little bit, for me, in my head, it got connected with Mish's question and with this anarchist mode that we have inside the team about bringing down all these concepts. And for me, is just to listen and hear the complexity of what is happening. I have a perfect example for me. The very first day when I didn't know that they were organized protests in Istanbul. And I somehow just felt that I really want, to go to Russian consulate in Istanbul and maybe just make a photo with the poster, "No War." And because I thought I would be by myself, I thought that there would be nobody there. I invited my Syrian friend just to make my picture. And because before we would go to protest together, we would go also to like Russian consulate protests to protest what's happening in Syria. And when I came, I got a little bit late. I found my Syrian friend in the middle of the huge crowd of Ukrainians and Russians. And she was in the middle, there were a lot of people, and she held this protest like Syrians are against the war too. And it was beautiful image. And we stayed there for some time, and then we talked with a group of Ukrainians next to us. And the girl was like, "Are you Syrian?" I thought Syrians are with Russia. I thought Syrians just support these kind of things. And my friend, who is in the opposition, super activist that was working years with local NGOs and media, she was like, and I literally just took her and got away from this protest. And we talked a lot about this very simplistic picture that the world gets about so many things. We love saying about propaganda in Russia, but I don't know if simplicity of the stories is the same thing. So for me, the greatest help is when I'm talking to somebody who understands that things are not so simple, that they are not them and all them are doing like this and thinking like this. So for me, this is first just this super complexity of what is happening. And the second one is actually, as a system practitioners, to try to create more spaces for us, because what's been happening so far, and what me and Alyona also been organizing the same kind of events for Russians, right? We now feel that there are a lot of conversations that Russians should do with each other. We organized a beautiful event about the rethinking 9th of May, which is the day that we celebrate greatly in Russia as a victory day against fascism and stopping the Second World War. Many of the little and big talks that we've been doing for the last 3 months were very, very narrow in the sense of who we've been inviting. We've been inviting Russians because we felt that this kind of difficult conversation we have to hold together. But I think that it should be already, it's a time that it should be happening in the world as well. And we know the tools. And I think for me, the main point of this tool is the quality of the conversation and the deepness of the conversation. And the conversation is something that is so difficult. And this simplicity stops from any kind of conversations. So maybe organize a bit more spaces where people from different countries can come and have this kind of conversation. That's what is lacking greatly, because it seemed that like everybody were pushed back to our nations, and suddenly you are just Russian and you cannot have any other conversation than that. There is such a potential for that right now.
And from my side, listening to that, I keep questioning, like, am my conversations biased? Do I have one tool that I'm trying to apply to any conversation? Like, if I was a consultant, I would do a PowerPoint presentation because that's my natural response. That would be my natural response. And as a systems practitioner, am I trying to apply hosting conversations to any kind of situation just as the default reaction? So a good question that keeps also pumping for me is which conversations are applicable at which time? Because with a lot of my friends now, I'm seeing people are exhausted. To be posted, to be in a conversation of this kind, you need to have some sort of inner resource. People are exhausted because, like, we've been in a massive, and I'm feeling that myself, that actually, like, part of me wants to just drop everything we're doing and just go be with kids and go be with my partner and go be with my family. Because if the world is doomed, that's the best thing I can be doing. So part of me is like questioning whether that's still a right response and whether it's now still the time for the action planner, self-organizing protest kind of time. Is it already the time for conversations? And I'm also questioning the idea of feel-good conversations. Are they helping in reality? Have we been doing a lot of work around just making people feel good in a conversation, and then they go out in the world and they fall back to whatever they've been doing before? So for me, this link between what the global communities is like, what I'm definitely interested in is I want, for myself, at least as a practitioner, to have more conversations with people outside of the dominating narrative. I really want to connect to practitioners in Africa, in Latin America, in Asian countries. What's happening there? What are they doing in that context? Because a lot of the tools, a lot of the concepts, a lot of the things that I'm relating to, I've seen in action in a very different environment. So what I would love to hear more, and would probably the worlds that I would love to connect my fellows and community of practice to, are outside of what seems out of Russia, in Russia as the highway, Northern and Europe, Northern America, and even like a very specific narrow spaces of that we kind of know of. So bringing in more voices from other parts of the world. And if we're talking about these places, indigenous voices, local minority work, civil rights work that is not widely heard of, probably it's also my bubble as well. I'm really interested to hear more about what's going on and connect our community of practice to other practitioners from a little bit more difficult context that we could probably relate to more in a way right now.
Thank you. This is time for closing remarks. What do you want to leave us with?
I would just probably express a lot of gratitude to contributing your time to hearing a story that probably is also on the margins of complexity work that is happening that might be quite small, but probably it gave certain ideas or perspectives that might be applicable to your context, that might be applicable to the work that you were doing. So really hope it was useful in a way. So like, don't let our work just go to waste. There should be some learning somewhere.
What you had before was a conversation about us and our work. I'm really grateful because I feel that that's what should be happening. So thank you for that.